My name is Wilder Sorrel, and I fix things for a living. Circuit boards, engine diagnostics, broken appliances. You name it. I can figure out what's wrong and make it right again. What I couldn't fix was the mess my wife Aven had made of our marriage, though it took me 3 months to realize just how broken everything had become. It started with the surrogacy arrangement. Aven announced it over dinner one Tuesday night, casual as discussing the weather. Our family friend Darren Halloway and his wife Jessa had been trying for years to have children. Medical complications made pregnancy impossible for Jessa, and they'd asked Aven to be their surrogate. "It's the right thing to do," Aven said, twirling pasta around her fork. "They're desperate, and we can help them start a family." I nodded, impressed by her generosity. Aven worked as a project manager for a health startup, always organized, always thinking ahead. The legal paperwork appeared within days, insurance forms were filed, and medical appointments scheduled. Everything seemed perfectly arranged. Too perfectly arranged, as it turned out. The first red flag came when I noticed Aven's calendar didn't match her stories. She'd mentioned doctor visits on Tuesdays, but her phone calendar showed those appointments on Wednesdays. Small discrepancies, easy to dismiss as simple mistakes, but I've spent 15 years troubleshooting complex systems, and patterns matter. The second flag was her phone behavior. Aven had always been attached to her device, but now it never left her sight. She took it to the bathroom, kept it under her pillow while sleeping, and turned the screen away whenever I walked past. When I asked about it, she'd laugh and say work was keeping her busy with the new product launch. The third flag was Darren himself. He'd started showing up at our house more frequently, always with some excuse about discussing the arrangement or bringing paperwork. But his visits coincided with times when Jessa was working her nursing shifts at the hospital, and he'd linger, making small talk, his eyes following Aven around the room in a way that made my stomach twist. I might have continued ignoring these warning signs if not for what happened on that Friday night in October. I was in my basement workshop, rebuilding a carburetor for a 1967 Mustang, when I heard Aven's phone buzzing upstairs. She was in the shower, and the sound kept repeating, insistent and urgent. Curiosity got the better of me. I climbed the stairs and found her phone face down on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the granite surface. The screen lit up with each new message, and I caught a glimpse of the sender's name. D. Not Darren, not Dr. Fenwick from the fertility clinic. Just D. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as I picked up the phone and swiped to read the messages. But something cold and sharp was growing in my chest, and I needed to know. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place as usual. Tell W you have another appointment." The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. What kind of medical appointment happened at night? And why would Darren be texting about it instead of the clinic staff? I scrolled up through their conversation, my hands trembling slightly as the truth unfolded. Messages about hotel rooms, jokes about playing doctor, references to our little secret, and when this is all over, we can be together. The shower was still running upstairs. Steam drifted down the hallway, and I could hear Aven humming some pop song, completely unaware that her carefully constructed lie was crumbling in my hands. There was no surrogacy arrangement. There never had been. My wife was having an affair with our family friend, and they'd used the pregnancy story as cover. All those medical appointments, all that paperwork, all those conversations about helping Jessa and Darren start a family. It was elaborate theater designed to hide their betrayal. I set the phone back exactly where I'd found it, screen down on the counter. Then I walked back to my workshop and sat in the darkness, listening to the house settle around me while my world rearranged itself into something I no longer recognized. The water stopped running upstairs. Aven's footsteps crossed the bedroom floor, and I heard her call down to me. "Wilder, did you hear my phone ring?" "No," I called back, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "Nothing down here." But that was a lie. Everything had changed down here. Everything had changed everywhere. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios and possibilities. Part of me wanted to storm upstairs and confront Aven immediately, to throw the evidence in her face and demand explanations. But I've learned that the best repairs require patience and planning. You don't just start yanking wires, you study the system, understand the problem, and then you fix it properly. By morning, I had a plan. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, with October wind rattling the windows and sending leaves skittering across our front yard. Aven was already up when I emerged from the basement, dressed in her yoga clothes and checking her phone. "Morning, honey," she said without looking up. "I have that appointment this afternoon, remember? Dr. Fenwick wants to run some additional tests." Of course," I said, pouring coffee from the pot she'd made. "Everything okay with the pregnancy?" She nodded, still focused on her screen. Just routine monitoring. Darren's picking me up at 2. Jess is working, so he offered to drive. The lie came so easily, delivered with the same tone she'd used to discuss grocery shopping or weekend plans. I marveled at her casual deception, wondering how long she'd been practicing this performance. "That's nice of him," I said. "Tell him I said hello." After Aven left for her yoga class, I got to work. My first stop was Leo Martinez, my best friend and manager of the Blue Harbor bar downtown. Leo had known both Aven and Darren for years, and he had a talent for noticing things other people missed. I found him in the bar's back office, reviewing inventory reports and nursing a cup of coffee that looked strong enough to strip paint. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Rough night?" "You could say that." I settled into the chair across from his desk. "Leo, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." His expression grew serious. "Shoot!" "Have you noticed anything strange about Aven lately, or about Darren?" Leo set down his coffee and leaned back in his chair. "Define strange." "I think they're having an affair." The words hung in the air between us. Leo didn't look surprised, which told me everything I needed to know. "How long have you suspected?" he asked. "Since last night, but you've known longer, haven't you?" Leo sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I wasn't sure. I hoped I was wrong. But they've been coming in here together, always when Jessa's working her evening shifts. They sit in the back booth, heads close together, and they leave separately. I figured it was just the surrogacy stuff, but it felt wrong. Yeah, it felt wrong." I filled Leo in on what I'd discovered, showing him screenshots I'd taken of Aven's text conversation with D. His face grew darker as he read. "This is messed up, Wilder. Really messed up. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to expose them, but I need more evidence first, and I need to do it right. Can you help me?" Leo didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need." My next stop was the fertility clinic. Dr. Fenwick's office was located in a modern medical complex on the outskirts of town, all glass and steel and carefully maintained landscaping. I'd been there once before, early in the supposed surrogacy process, to sign some initial paperwork. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman named Carol, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Sorrel, how nice to see you. How is Aven feeling?" "That's actually why I'm here," I said, settling into one of the waiting room chairs. "I wanted to clarify some details about her treatment schedule. She mentioned having an appointment this afternoon, but I thought Dr. Fenwick didn't work weekends." Carol's smile faltered slightly. "This afternoon? That's odd. Dr. Fenwick is at a conference in Portland until Monday, and we don't have any weekend appointments scheduled?" My heart rate quickened, but I kept my voice casual. "Maybe I misunderstood. Could you check Aven's file? I just want to make sure I have her schedule right." Carol clicked through her computer system, frowning at the screen. "That's strange. According to our records, Aven missed her last 2 appointments. We've been trying to reach her to reschedule." "Missed appointments?" "Yes, on the 15th and 22nd. We called several times, but she never responded." "Is everything all right with the surrogacy arrangement?" I forced a smile. "I'm sure it's just a miscommunication. Could you print out a copy of her complete appointment history? I'd like to cross-reference it with my calendar." Carol hesitated. "I'm not sure I can release medical records without—" "I'm her husband," I said gently, and I was listed as an emergency contact on all the original paperwork. After a brief consultation with her supervisor, Carol provided me with a summary of Aven's appointment history. The pattern was clear. She'd attended the first few visits in July and August, then stopped showing up entirely in September, but she'd continued telling me about regular appointments throughout that period. I thanked Carol and left the clinic with another piece of evidence. But I wasn't finished yet. My final stop was the most difficult one. I drove to Darren and Jessa's house, a neat colonial in one of the town's newer subdivisions. Jessa's car was in the driveway. She must have been between shifts, but Darren's BMW was nowhere to be seen. Jessa answered the door in scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked tired, but smiled when she saw me. "Wilder, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in." I followed her into their living room, noting the family photos covering the mantelpiece and side tables, pictures of Jessa and Darren at various stages of their relationship, their wedding, vacation trips, holiday gatherings. They looked happy in those photos. They looked like people who deserved better than what was happening to them. "Can I get you something to drink?" Jessa asked. "Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great, thanks." She bustled around their kitchen while I gathered my courage. This conversation would change everything for both of us, and there would be no taking it back once I started. Jessa returned with 2 steaming mugs and settled onto the couch across from me. So what brings you by? Is everything okay with Aven? I know this whole surrogacy process can be stressful. I took a deep breath. Jessa, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be difficult to hear, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Her smile faded. What kind of truth? There is no surrogacy arrangement. There never was. Aven and Darren have been having an affair, and they've been using the pregnancy story to cover it up. The color drained from Jessa's face. Her coffee mug trembled in her hands, and for a moment I thought she might drop it. That's not possible, she whispered. Darren wouldn't... We've been trying to have children for years. He knows how much this means to me. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots of Aven's text conversation. Jessa read them in silence, her expression growing more stricken with each message. I'm so sorry, I said. I know this is devastating, but I thought you should know before this went any further. Jessa set down her coffee and covered her face with her hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked up at me, and I saw something hard and determined in her eyes. What do we do now? She asked. We expose them, publicly. We make sure everyone knows what they've done. Jessa nodded slowly. Yes, I think that's exactly what we should do. Sunday morning brought the kind of crisp autumn weather that usually made me appreciate living in Maine. But as I sat in my truck outside the fertility clinic, waiting for Aven and Darren to arrive for their fake appointment, I felt nothing but cold anticipation. Jessa sat beside me in the passenger seat, clutching a manila folder containing printouts of the text messages, appointment records, and other evidence we'd gathered. She'd barely slept, she told me, spending most of the night going through Darren's belongings and finding more proof of his deception. There, she said, pointing toward the parking lot entrance. That's his car. Darren's silver BMW pulled into a space near the clinic entrance. Through the windshield, I could see him and Aven talking, both of them looking relaxed and comfortable. Aven laughed at something he said, reaching over to touch his arm in a gesture that was clearly intimate. Ready? I asked Jessa. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. Let's do this. We walked into the clinic together, our footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Carol looked up from the reception desk with surprise. Mr. Sorrel, back so soon? And Mrs. Halloway, how nice to see you. We're here to meet with my wife and your husband, I told Jessa, loud enough for my voice to carry across the waiting room. I believe they have some explaining to do. Aven and Darren were sitting in the far corner, and I watched recognition and panic flash across their faces as they spotted us. Aven stood up quickly, smoothing down her dress. Wilder! What are you doing here? I told you this was just a routine appointment. Funny thing about that, I said, walking closer. Dr. Fenwick is at a conference in Portland, has been since Friday, so unless you're meeting with his ghost, I'd say your appointment is fictional. Darren had gone pale, his eyes darting between Jessa and me like a trapped animal looking for escape routes. This is a misunderstanding. We were just what? Jessa's voice was steady but cold. Just continuing your affair while pretending to help me have a baby? Just using my infertility as cover for your betrayal? The waiting room had gone completely quiet. Other patients and staff members were staring at our little drama, and I could see Carol reaching for her phone, probably calling security. Aven tried to regain control of the situation. You're both being ridiculous. Yes, Darren and I have been meeting, but it's about the surrogacy arrangements. There are legal details to work out, financial considerations. Really? I pulled out my phone and began reading from the screenshots. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place as usual. Tell W you have another appointment. I looked up at her. What kind of legal detail is that exactly? Aven's composure cracked. You went through my phone? How dare you violate my privacy like that? Your privacy? Jessa stepped forward, opening her manila folder. What about my marriage? What about the months you've been lying to my face, pretending to care about helping me have children while you were sleeping with my husband? She began pulling out documents and photographs, spreading them across the coffee table in the waiting room center. Bank statements showing hotel charges, credit card receipts from restaurants where Aven and Darren had been dining together, more text message printouts, these from Darren's phone, which Jessa had accessed the night before. This one's my favorite, Jessa said, holding up a piece of paper. It's from last Tuesday. Darren texting Aven about how much he enjoyed their afternoon together, and how he couldn't wait until they could stop pretending and be together openly. Darren finally found his voice. Jessa, please, let's discuss this privately. There are things you don't understand? Oh, I understand perfectly. Jessa's professional nursing demeanor had completely disappeared, replaced by raw fury. I understand that while I was working double shifts to pay for fertility treatments, you were playing house with my friend. I understand that every time I cried about not being able to have children, you were planning your future with someone else. By now, clinic staff had emerged from the back offices to see what was causing the commotion. Carol stood behind the reception desk with wide eyes, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Dr. Fenwick's office manager, a stern woman named Patricia, approached our group with obvious irritation. "I'm going to have to ask you all to leave. This is a medical facility, not a place for personal disputes." "Actually," I said, "this is exactly the right place for this dispute, because this medical facility has been used as part of an elaborate fraud." I turned to Patricia and Carol. "My wife and Darren Halloway have been telling people they're involved in a surrogacy arrangement through this clinic. They've been using fake medical appointments as cover for their affair. I think you should know that your facility's name has been used in this deception." Patricia's expression shifted from irritation to concern. "Is this true?" Aven made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "These people are having some kind of breakdown. Yes, I'm pregnant, and yes, it's a surrogacy arrangement. Just because they're paranoid and jealous doesn't mean—" "No," Carol interrupted, stepping out from behind the reception desk. "I checked our records yesterday when Mr. Sorrel asked about his wife's appointments. She hasn't been here since August, and there's no active surrogacy arrangement in our system." The silence that followed was deafening. Aven looked around the room, seeing her story collapse in real time. Darren had slumped back into his chair, his head in his hands. "Furthermore," Patricia continued, "if you've been representing yourselves as patients of this clinic while conducting personal business elsewhere, that could constitute fraud and misrepresentation. We take our reputation very seriously here." Jessa gathered up her evidence and stood to leave. "Come on, Wilder. I think we've accomplished what we came here to do." As we walked toward the exit, I heard Aven calling after us. "This isn't over. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're jealous and suspicious." I turned back to face her one last time. "I didn't destroy anything, Aven. I just stopped pretending not to see what was already broken." Outside in the parking lot, Jessa and I stood beside our vehicles, both of us breathing hard from the adrenaline of confrontation. "How do you feel?" I asked her. She considered the question carefully. "Angry, hurt, but also relieved. At least now I know the truth." "What happens next?" "Next, I call my lawyer and start divorce proceedings. What about you?" I looked back toward the clinic, where Aven and Darren were probably still trying to explain themselves to the increasingly unsympathetic staff. "I'm not sure yet, but I know I'm not finished with them." The Blue Harbor Bar was unusually crowded for a Tuesday night, filled with the kind of locals who treated Leo's place as their second living room. I sat in my usual spot at the far end of the bar, nursing a beer and watching the door. Word traveled fast in a town like ours, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the story of Sunday's clinic confrontation made its way through the local gossip network. Leo wiped down glasses behind the bar, occasionally glancing my way with concern. He'd been checking on me every few minutes since I'd arrived, clearly worried about my state of mind. "You sure you're okay?" he asked during a lull in the dinner rush. "You've been staring at that same beer for an hour." "Just thinking," I said, "planning my next move." "And what would that be?" Before I could answer, the bar's front door opened and Darren walked in. He looked around nervously, spotted me at the bar, and approached with the careful movements of someone walking into hostile territory. "Wilder," he said, settling onto the stool beside me. "We need to talk." Leo positioned himself within earshot, pretending to organize bottles while keeping a protective eye on the situation. "I'm listening," I said, without looking at Darren. "What happened at the clinic on Sunday? That was unfortunate, but I think there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of my relationship with Aven." I turned to face him fully. "Really? What kind of misunderstanding?" Darren shifted uncomfortably. "Look, yes, we've become close during this whole surrogacy process, and maybe we've developed feelings for each other, but nothing physical has happened. We've been trying to do the right thing, to think about what's best for everyone involved." "The right thing," I repeated. "Like lying to your wife about medical appointments, like using her infertility as cover for your emotional affair, like making her believe she might finally have the child she's always wanted while you plan to leave her." "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is that simple." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a particular screenshot. "Here's a text from you to Aven from 3 weeks ago. Can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon. You felt so good in my arms. When can we do it again?" Darren's face went red. "Where did you get that?" "Jessa found it on your phone. Apparently you're not as careful with your security as you thought." I pocketed the phone. "So tell me again about how nothing physical happened." Several other bar patrons had begun paying attention to our conversation. I could see them leaning in, trying to catch details of what was clearly becoming the most interesting drama to hit Blue Harbor in months. Darren lowered his voice. Okay, fine. Yes, we've been intimate, but Aven and I love each other, Wilder. This isn't just some casual fling. We want to build a life together. Then why the elaborate charade? Why not just ask for divorces like adults? Because we knew you and Jessa would try to stop us. You'd make it difficult, drag things out, try to turn the whole town against us. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Turn the town against you? Darren, you did that all by yourselves. Do you have any idea what people are saying about you two right now? He glanced around the bar nervously. What do you mean? I mean, everyone knows. The clinic staff talked. Jess has been showing people the evidence. Your business partners are asking questions about your integrity. Aven's boss heard about the insurance fraud implications. I took a sip of my beer. You wanted to avoid making things difficult? Congratulations. You've made them impossible instead. Darren's composure finally cracked. This is your fault. You could have handled this privately, worked things out between the four of us. But instead, you had to make a public spectacle, humiliate us in front of the whole town. My fault? I stood up from my bar stool, and Leo moved closer in case things escalated. You're the one who decided to cheat on your wife. You're the one who convinced my wife to help you do it. You're the one who used Jessa's medical condition as cover for your lies. I just stopped pretending not to notice. You self-righteous piece of... Darren started to say, but Leo interrupted. Hey now, Leo said firmly. Let's keep this civil, gentlemen. This is a family establishment. Darren looked around the bar, suddenly realizing how many people were watching our confrontation. His voice dropped to an angry whisper. This isn't over, Wilder. You think you've won something, but you have no idea what you've started. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Aven and I are going to be together, with or without your approval. And if you keep trying to interfere with that, you're going to regret it. He stood up and threw a $20 bill on the bar, then stalked toward the exit. Just before he reached the door, he turned back. By the way, he called out, loud enough for the entire bar to hear, you might want to ask Aven about the pregnancy test she took last week. Turns out our fake surrogacy arrangement might be producing real results. The door slammed behind him, leaving the bar in stunned silence. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Leo placed a protective hand on my shoulder. You okay, buddy? I wasn't okay. I was the opposite of okay. If Aven was actually pregnant with Darren's child, it changed everything. It meant their relationship was more serious than I'd realized. It meant there really was going to be a baby, just not the way anyone had originally planned. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Aven. We need to talk. Come home. I looked up at Leo. Can you give me a ride? I don't think I should drive right now. Of course, but Wilder, maybe you should think about what you want to say before you go home. This conversation is going to determine a lot about what happens next. He was right. As we drove through the quiet streets toward my house, I tried to prepare myself for what was coming, but there was no preparing for the sight that greeted me when we pulled into my driveway. Aven was loading suitcases into her car. I stood in my driveway watching my wife pack her belongings, feeling strangely detached from the scene unfolding before me. Leo had offered to stay, but I'd sent him home. This conversation needed to happen without witnesses. Going somewhere? I asked as Aven emerged from the house carrying another suitcase. She didn't look at me as she loaded it into her trunk. I'm staying at my sister's for a few days. We both need space to figure out what happens next. What happens next is pretty obvious, isn't it? You're pregnant with another man's child. You've been lying to me for months. You've humiliated me in front of the entire town. I leaned against my truck. Seems like the next step is divorce papers. Aven finally turned to face me. In the porch light, I could see that she'd been crying, but there was defiance in her posture too. It doesn't have to be ugly, Wilder. We can handle this like adults. Adults? You think adults create fake surrogacy arrangements to cover their affairs? You think adults use their friends' medical conditions as props in their deception? I never meant for it to go this far, she said. When Darren and I when we first realized we had feelings for each other, we thought it would pass. We tried to stay away from each other. But you didn't. No, we didn't. Because what we have is real, Wilder. It's not just attraction or infatuation. We love each other. I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest. And the pregnancy? Is that real too? Aven's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Yes, I'm about 10 weeks along. So when exactly did you plan to tell me? When you started showing? When you went into labor? Or were you just going to keep pretending it was a surrogacy baby until you could figure out how to disappear with Darren? We were going to tell you both soon. We were just waiting for the right time. The right time, I laughed bitterly. There's never a right time to destroy two marriages, Aven. There's never a good moment to betray the people who trust you most. She crossed her arms defensively. You think this was easy for me? You think I wanted to hurt you? I've been miserable for months, trying to figure out how to handle this situation without destroying everyone's lives. Well, congratulations. You failed spectacularly. Aven's composure finally broke. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I won't apologize for falling in love. I won't apologize for wanting to be happy. Happy? I pushed away from my truck and stepped closer to her. You want to be happy. What about Jessa? Does her happiness matter? What about the years she spent believing her husband loved her? The money she spent on fertility treatments? The hope you gave her that she might finally have a child? Jessa will be better off without Darren. Deep down, she knows they weren't right for each other. That's not your decision to make. My voice echoed off the houses around us, and I realized I was shouting. I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak more quietly. You don't get to decide what's best for other people, Aven. You don't get to blow up their lives and then claim it's for their own good. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. So what now? You're going to try to punish us? Make our lives as difficult as possible? I'm not going to do anything. You've already punished yourselves. Do you have any idea what people are saying about you two? Darren's business is suffering because clients don't trust him anymore. Your boss is questioning your judgment and integrity. The clinic is considering filing a complaint with the insurance company about fraudulent claims. Those are just temporary problems. People will move on to other gossip eventually. Maybe, but some consequences are permanent. I gestured toward her car, packed with her belongings. You're about to be a single mother with a reputation for deception. Darren's about to lose his wife, his business, and probably half his assets in the divorce. Was it worth it? Aven lifted her chin defiantly. Yes, it was worth it, because at least now we can be together honestly. Honestly, I shook my head. You still don't get it, do you? You've built your entire relationship on lies. You've proven to each other that you're both willing to betray the people closest to you. What makes you think you won't eventually betray each other? For the first time since I'd arrived home, Aven looked uncertain. That's different. What Darren and I have is special. What you have is a shared willingness to be selfish and dishonest. That's not love, Aven. That's just mutual destruction. She closed her car trunk with more force than necessary. I don't have to listen to this. I came here to try to end things civilly, but clearly you're not interested in that. Civilly? I felt anger rising in my chest again. You want to end things civilly? Then answer one question for me. When you were planning this whole charade, when you were setting up fake medical appointments and lying to everyone who cared about you, did you ever once consider just asking me for a divorce? Aven was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was afraid you'd fight it. Try to make it difficult. So instead, you decided to make it impossible. She got into her car without another word. As she backed out of our driveway, I called after her through the open window. Aven, one more thing. She stopped the car and looked at me. I hope you and Darren are very happy together, because you're going to need each other. After what you've done, you won't have anyone else. She drove away without responding, leaving me standing alone in my driveway under the October stars. For the first time in months, the house was completely quiet. No phone conversations in the next room, no mysterious text messages, no elaborate scheduling of fake appointments, just silence and the strange relief that comes with finally knowing the truth. I walked back into my house and poured myself a drink, then sat in my living room surrounded by the remnants of a marriage that had apparently been over long before I realized it was ending. Tomorrow, I would call a lawyer. Tomorrow, I would start the process of rebuilding my life. But tonight, I just sat in the quiet and tried to remember what it felt like to trust someone completely. It seemed like a very long time ago.